Eternal command. Это как делать? Ты серьезно, что ли? Не шутишь, они? Это... А, кстати, это тоже смешная. Тоже весело. Вот не, для себя она тут отлично. Нет, я для себя она думаю.
On a platform. I made a lot of missteps in your studio. Alright, so that's it. Not bad, right? It might seem complicated to get into game development, but trust me, this is just a lot of words spewing out of my mouth. I know I talk kind of fast. In hindsight, looking back, it really wasn't that complicated for me to release a game on a platform. I made a lot of missteps, so I'm glad you're watching videos like this because I certainly didn't. Honestly, this is a really good piece of advice. Budget for stress. Budget for anxiety. Budget for worrying, and I mean budget in here. Plan for it, because every game kind of feels like building a house of cards. It's part of the process. Making games is a challenging thing. Everyone's going to stress about it. So if you budget for it, if you plan on it, believe it or not, you probably won't stress or worry as much. I used to feel so stressed out because I felt like I was the only person making games that felt stressed, when in reality, you're putting together a new world. You're playing God with code, and you're using all these different plugins, all these different platforms and systems. It can be really stressful, so don't stress out. It's really a lot of fun when you learn to get used to living in transition. I mean, honestly, all of us need to live in transition, regardless of whether we're making games or not. Life changes, things change. Get used to it, learn to love it. I certainly have, and I'm much happier and less anxious for it. Again, my name is Thomas Brush. I make video games for a living. I love what I do, and I love posting videos about it. I post bi-weekly. If you want to subscribe to this channel, I would love for you to do that. Hit the bell icon to get notified of my bi-weekly video posts, and leave a comment. I'll try to answer any questions you have. Finally, I just want to let you know that Patreon is a huge way for me to pay the bills and run this studio. I have a link to Patreon in the description. There's a lot of cool tiers. You can actually get your name included in the next video, and I love doing that, giving shout outs to my supporters. And also, I'm doing this new thing where I actually want to help you, I want to coach you, I want to be your mentor and your advisor, and maybe even your creative director for your game. If that interests you, head on over to Patreon. There is a tier for me to mentor you and be your advisor. I'd love to help you out and coach you. Thanks again, guys. I'll see you later. Bye.
My name is David Whaley, and I made a game called The First Tree. And as you can see from the title, it was no time, no budget, no problem. But it's kind of, I don't know why I wrote that, because there was a lot of problems in finishing my game. There was a lot of sacrifices. But it worked out, it was successful, and that's what I'm going to talk about with you guys today. So if you don't know what it is, The First Tree, oh, that should be playing. So The First Tree is a third-person exploration game about a fox looking for her missing cubs. and also about a second parallel story being told about a son reconnecting with his father in Alaska. And this was a project I made to get out these emotions of me losing my own father to a heart attack early in life, or in 2010. And so I made this, and I wanted to share that story with people. And for a hobbyist project, it did a little better than I thought. I was able to show it at the Smithsonian American Art Museum, showed it at PAX West, and it was cool to like let that little story like gain traction with people. And maybe you're thinking that's not a super unique story for like an indie game success story. But what usually gets people's attention is that I finished the game while working full-time as a technical artist at a VR company called The Void. I was raising 2 kids and making sure that my partner, Elise, had time for her art career. And then I made the game without very much money at all.
Я не очень понимаю, все равно не понимаю. И прям вот вообще никак, да. Да, ну понимаю, да.
So when the game launched on Steam, September 14th, 2017, it cost me $10,000 to make, and that includes my website, conventions, music, everything. The time was about 18 months of nights and weekends, or about 1,000 hours. And its first year, it made $150,000. That was my gross revenue. And consoles came a year later. I was able to use, or about 1,000 hours. And its first year, it made $150,000. That was my gross revenue. And consoles came a year later. I was able to use those funds to pay for a console port with the assistance of Do Games. And that made $150,000 in its first month on all 3 consoles. So yeah, it was awesome. It was like a dream come true. And a lot of people ask me, how did you do that with so little time and money? What you've probably heard about is how the game had a lot of Reddit traction. And I got good at submitting this content, these GIFs, and seeing how they would perform. And so when on launch day, I could have the marketing dream come true and then get on the front page of Reddit, which got me about 3 million views on that GIF and 200,000 Steam page visits. And then on consoles, in November 2018, when the console release came out, I was able to do it again. And so why did it do so well? That's a question I ask myself a lot. And I would say luck did have a big part to it, but it's not the entire answer. The facts are that I submitted a lot of GIFs everywhere, and it was consistent posting over 18 months. Some of the posts did great, some of them didn't. And it basically comes down to, how do you eat an elephant, or a fox in this case? You eat it 1 bite at a time. So those years of experimenting that taught me what works. What also taught me a lot is that I made another game before the first tree, just to challenge myself, because I come from a film and design background. I'm not much of a coder at all. So I made my first game. It was a first-person exploration game called Home is Where One Starts. And I used mostly just Unity assets and Playmaker. And through a lot of bundles and extreme discount, I was able to make $15,000. And it also taught me what not to do when releasing your first indie game. I launched at midnight because I was like, oh, that's what movies do. They do a midnight premiere. I'll try that. I changed my launch date last minute for some reason. I had no one covered the game on day one. I had no email list, only 200 Twitter followers. And there was a lot of popularly requested features for Steam, like trading cards and subtitles that I waited to patch in later. So I've distilled what I learned from that first experience into my launch plan for the first. Tree. And how would I sum up like my launch plan for the first tree? The best thing is, I would say, is it's low time, high impact strategies. I'm not sure that's like that won't be taught in business schools anytime soon. But what it just means to me is like, you don't have a lot of time, you need to be as productive as possible and try to like take that risk of making a high impact, even if it's a little more risky. So the rest of my talk's divided into two sections: how I developed the game with little time and money, and how I marketed it. So first, just finding that time to finish your game. That's hard, especially, if you're a parent, like how exhausting life can be. So this was kind of our rough plan with me and my wife, Elise. I'd work full time, and then also Elise needed time for her art career. So we hired neighborhood teens to see if they could watch our kids for about $7 an hour. So I'd get home from work 45 minutes, and then get the quality time together, and then at the end of the night, probably fit in 2 hours of development. And that gave me about 10 hours a week. And usually, there were sacrifices there. I wish I've played more of all of your guys' indie games, but I definitely haven't. I didn't play many games or watch many movies. Usually, to get quality time with Elise, we'd watch a people getting hurt on YouTube compilation video at the end of the night. And at the Void, I don't think you need a game development day job to make your passion project come to life. I will say though, there is some crossover benefit. I remember, again, I'm not much of a programmer, but I was learning about singletons the first time, and we were using that in a project at the Void. And just learning about that helped me fix a Steamworks initialization bug that had caused me a ton of grief. So that's cool when that stuff crosses over, but I don't know if it's necessarily required. Okay, so you found the time. Now, what do you do with that? Now, this is something, I would even say I used to be a little embarrassed about this, but I'm now a huge believer in using publicly available assets that you can license. And prototyping, it's great, but just using it as a springboard to save yourself valuable time and creating it, revising it and changing it to add your own creative twist, that's the reason my game was finished. That's why my game released, is because of these resources. I probably could have made a lot of this stuff myself, but I estimated it saved me roughly 600 hours. And while I did have to spend a little bit of money, it was nothing compared to hiring a full-time composer or even voice actors. I did the voice acting. I pressured my wife to do the voice acting. She did great. I wish I didn't do that. So maybe we should have hired an actor, but you just gotta do what's best for you. This is an example of how I tried to make these, this beautiful environment pack by Michael Gustafson, try to make it my own. And so, yeah, I would even say it helped other artists too when the game was successful in the marketing, because all the music was done by a composer named Josh Kramer, and his music is gorgeous, and it was only $30 to $50 a song. And so when the game did well, we were able to kind of form a partnership and help get his music out there more. So this is the third thing about finishing your game, is I tried to challenge myself never to have a 0% day. I have this gift running because I love UX and UI design. And I remember I was so burnt out, I did not want to work on the game anymore, but I love doing this stuff. So my thought was, if you can just aim for a 1% day and get those small wins, then it will encourage you to do the harder stuff that you hate to do. So whether it was just answering an email or doing a small color change, I tried to work on my game every single day. So what are the cons of doing these low-time, high-impact strategies for development? Well, I did have to compromise my vision a little bit. Like, I'm inspired by the games like Firewatch and Journey, but of course it couldn't be like that. It was just me using licensed assets. So I tried to, my game had to reflect that. It was a shorter game, it's like 1.5 hours to 2 hours long, and I launched it for $8 on Steam when it came out. Another problem is recognizable stock assets, which I am surprised that it wasn't as a big of a deal as I would have thought. I probably skimmed about 10,000 comments about my game, and only about 10 to 15 even mentioned that they recognize the art assets or the music. So, and even usually commenters would say, get mad at those people making fun of it, saying, it's not an asset flip, dude, he tried to make it his own. So that's pretty cool. I will say that with music, especially with YouTube copyright IDs, if you're using stock music, those will get flagged, and that could make content creators a little upset. So if your game is dependent on like that, sharing those videos online, that's something to keep in mind. And then a really big problem.
Наоборот, нет. Я же выкладывал это все, да наоборот, только выложил же я все это, наоборот. Как это называется-то? Да, такой. Не понял.
One was the extremely
Hey video creators, with Envato Elements you can create better.
Hey, wow, hi, my name is Thomas Brush. I'm the creator of a game called Pinstripe, also releasing a game called Neversong. Those games are going to be available on pretty much every platform. If you want to take a look at those games, click the link in the description. Always remember you can get a free copy of Pinstripe by supporting on Patreon. Today, I want to encourage all of you, while you're at home, many of us are quarantined, just take some time and learn game development. I know it can be a discouraging time in your country or your economy, but just know that game development is definitely worth your time. And so I want to talk to you specifically about why I love game development, why even in the midst of this weirdness with this virus, I'm spending every day focusing on game development and just having fun and enjoying making games. So here are 5 reasons why game development is the best job in the whole world. But before we get started, guys, I want to thank Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Skillshare is an online learning community for creatives where millions come together to take the next step in their creative journey for 2020. Now, specifically, if you're curious about deepening your existing passion for game design, it's an incredible place. Whether it's audio design for your games, or 2D illustration, or animation, or Unity, or Unreal, coding, storytelling, marketing management, whatever it is you need to learn about game development, it's on Skillshare. Now, one of my favorite classes is by Rusty Smith, and it just covers Unity basics. Now, the coolest part about this ad read is, hey, what do you have to lose? Just get 2 free months of Skillshare Premium by clicking the link in the description. It's really that easy. And you really can't beat that, guys. Give it a shot, see what happens. Let's make 2020 the year where you become a game dev and release your very first game. Or if you've already done that, congratulations, but let's make it the year where you take game dev to the next level. All on Skillshare. Oh, and by the way, the first 1,000 people to click the link in the description will get 2 free months of Skillshare Premium. So the first reason, and I've talked about this maybe a little bit in my previous videos, is income potential. So with indie game development, because there's a good chance that you're gonna make a decent game or a good game, there's potential to make millions of dollars. I can't talk about specific numbers for myself, but I can tell you that before I started making games, I was not making 6 figures. Once I started making games, I eventually started making 6 figures. And that's not even with like Kickstarter campaigns. Kickstarter campaigns aside, it's become the norm for me to make a 6-figure salary making games. And that's I live in South Carolina, so a 6-figure salary is a decent salary. And when I was first working for a boss in a marketing agency, the income potential, I think at the time, it was like $70,000 was where I would be if I had stayed working there for about 10 years. And I was a graphic designer and did some marketing work. Now, obviously, it depends on which country or state you live in, but in my state, we have a pretty low cost of living. So $70,000 was probably the cap or the ceiling at that current job. Now, obviously, you can change jobs and you can go work for a different company and get raises and use leverage, but I found that game development got me where I wanted to go financially much faster. And that's, again, because you can make a hit and make some good money. Now, obviously, you're going to have some not so great hits in your career, but overall, the income potential is pretty high. And I can tell you that last year was definitely, or this year, I'm sorry, last year and this year, it's kind of a mix, has been really the best time for me financially with game development. All right, the second reason why game development is the absolute best job in the whole world, and this is specific to indie game development. The second reason is it's the cheapest overhead ever for running a business because everything is digital. So I don't have to have a studio, right? I'm just paying a mortgage for my family that I'm working in my house. I have a PC. It's a decent PC. It's nothing amazing. The software I use, most of it is free. Some of it is subscriptions like Adobe or Unity. But even still, the cost to make games is very small. Now, obviously, in previous videos, I've told you that my games can cost more than $100,000. The reason why is because you actually have to just pay yourself a salary, right? Or two people a salary. So all you're really paying for a game is your salary. Now, obviously, that can change depending on the size of your studio, whether you want to actually rent out a space, whether you need to hire different artists, contract out porting services, etc., etc. But all I can say is for me, I was actually just looking at my budget and talking it over with financial advisor this week. My budget is tiny to operate my company, but the sky's the limit in terms of your return on your investment. So operation costs for running a studio are tiny. Now, there might be some people out there who would argue with me and tell me that it's ridiculously expensive to make games. And all I can say is, I just know my personal experience. It's been very small, and I'm a one-man studio, so that I know that that's a little different. But as a one-person or two-person team, man, you can really make games for a very cheap operational cost. That's very different than most industries out there. The third one is more of an emotional reason, and that is basically game development, for me, especially indie game development, makes me a much more resilient person. Before I started making games, I was a very fearful, more resilient person.
Эластичный управление становишься. Устойчивый.